Welcome back! It's been a while. It's been like 5 minutes for me. My last video was my top 10 favorite translated books of 2021, and now I'm doing my favorite non-translated English language books of 2021, and I don't think I actually said why. The main reason why is that my favorite book that came out in 2021 was written in English, and I want to talk about it. So, I made this video. Here are my top 10, I stumble over this every time. Here are my top 10 English language books of 2021. Number 10, The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Dalila Harris. I really enjoyed this book. I was super hyped for it when it came out. The lead up to its launch had me very intrigued, and then I got it as soon as it came out. I wasn't given a review copy, I bought a big hardback, and I really enjoyed it. It is a twist on the thriller, a genre that I know very little about. I typically think of political thrillers as things that dads read on the beach. Not my thing. But Zakiya Dalila Harris has done something very unique here. It is a book about the relationship between different races and classes in modern America. The Other Black Girl is set in a publishing house in Manhattan. The protagonist is the only black woman in the office until the other black girl joins the office. And our protagonist thinks, okay, yay, I'm gonna make a friend. But is she? This is a very creeping dread kind of a novel. It's very clever in how it explores class and race dynamics, but it's also just a lot of fun as a pseudo piece of thriller genre fiction. There's a lot to enjoy here, and it's a pretty chunky book. I think it's like 500 pages, and it makes use of all of that space. As I said in my last video, I don't have any of these books with me because I am currently in the Netherlands. And so, my number 9 book, I really am just trying to remember as much as I can about it. This is Sterling Karat Gold by Isabel Weidner. A few years ago, I came across Isabel Weidner's work when their book, We Are Made of Diamond Stuff, was shortlisted for the Goldsmiths Prize. And I went to Goldsmiths University and I saw them and other shortlisters all give readings and talk about their books. That year, Lucy Ellmann won it for Ducks Newburyport. Sorry, Rick. But this year, Isabel Weidner was nominated again and won the Goldsmiths Prize for Sterling Karat Gold. Sterling Karat Gold is a very tough book to read, in the same way that, say, Kobo Abe's books are difficult to read. And Kobo Abe writes very Kafkaesque novels, and this isn't just a Kafkaesque novel. Sterling Karat Gold is a retelling of Kafka's The Trial. But Isabel Weidner is a German-born British citizen writing in English, and they are writing about the state of modern Britain. This is a very political novel. It's a novel about Brexit. It's a novel about class disparity. It's a novel about gender and sexuality and queerness and queer rights. It's about a lot of things. It's about the general public's relationship to queer, genderqueer, non-binary people. There is so much going on here in a retelling of Kafka's The Trial. I'm a huge fan of Franz Kafka. I love The Trial, and I was so excited for an author as unique and talented as Isabel Weidner to create something like this, and what they've done is just astonishing. It's a tough book to read. It is trippy and strange and often completely nonsensical, but then it is always making sense in its nonsense. Even if you don't really know what's going on at certain moments, you can see the allegories at play. You can feel Isabel Weidner's anger and frustration with so many different aspects, social and political, of British society. There's a lot going on, and it's fantastic. On a more fun note, kind of, number 8 is Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. I was kind of surprised by this. I didn't expect this book to make my top 10. It was a book that I had a lot of fun with, but I just couldn't resist putting it in here. I really like Greek mythology. I'm really enjoying this trend of Greek retellings, especially feminist ones. That's why I made a video about it. And Ariadne in particular has become one of my favorites of this, let's call it genre. Ariadne tells the story of Ariadne. It is a retelling of the myth of Theseus and the Minotaur, told from the perspective of the Minotaur's sister, Ariadne. At the beginning, we find out about the Minotaur and how he ended up being what he is. We follow Ariadne as she meets Theseus and helps him make a plan to kill the Minotaur and escape the labyrinth. And then we follow Ariadne on her journey from Crete. Is she from Crete? I think it's Crete. Onto an island that she's trapped on where she meets Dionysus, the sexiest of all the gods. It's a lot of fun. Again, it's feminist and it's angry and it's difficult and it's frustrating in places when it wants to be, but it's also a really fun Greek mythology retelling. I enjoyed Ariadne, and I know that Jennifer Saint is bringing out Electra in 2022, and I'm very hyped to read that as well. Number 7 is A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. Becky Chambers is one of my favourite authors of all time, and that is in part thanks to this book, as well as all of her other wonderful bits of science fiction. Becky Chambers is a very, very special science fiction writer. I, at least, would call her the, not future of sci-fi, because she's writing now, but she's going to be remembered as the leading figure of science fiction at this moment in time, at least in my opinion. A Psalm for the Wild Built is a philosophical novella. It's a short and very poignant and very powerful journey that follows a monk. It's set on a moon, just some random moon, and this monk goes about making tea and listening to people's problems and learning to give advice. They're not very good at doing it at first, and then they get better as they go. And this moon also previously had this industrial revolution that led to robots becoming completely sentient. And the people of this moon made the decision to let the robots free and let them go live their lives and be what they want to be. And the monk meets a robot and is the first person to do so in a long time. And then the rest of the novel is a wandering journey and conversation between the monk and the robot, and it's absolutely delightful. It makes you feel good about yourself, it makes you feel good about life. It's charming, it's sweet, it's gently and lightly philosophical, and you will not regret reading it. At number 6 is 100 Boyfriends by Bronte Purnell. When this book first came out, I did not shut up about it. I was telling people about it, I was tweeting about it, I made a video about it. 100 Boyfriends is a fantastic queer semi-short story collection. I think if I remember rightly, there are 25 stories in here, so not actually 100. And it's about different gay relationships in modern America, specifically black gay relationships in modern America. It's a poignant book. It's difficult at times. It's warming at other times, but it's mostly funny. This is a very, very satisfyingly graphic collection of stories about love and sex, and I laughed so often at the moments in this book. I absolutely cherish some of the moments in this book, and I think back to them really often. 100 Boyfriends is a lovely collection of stories. It's really important to have more books like this, these raw and honest and quirky and funny and sweet books that are written by gay black men. I am so happy that we have a book like this. When it came out, it was everywhere on social media. Bookshops were putting it in the windows, and I was so glad to see it. 100 Boyfriends is fantastic. Another recent read that I was surprised to put on this list, and I was surprised by how high it ranked on this list in the end, was She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. I really, really enjoyed this book. It is a wonderful blend of genres. It's historical fiction. It is a feminist retelling of a real person who is also kind of a legend, I guess. You know, a blend of reality and mythology. It has a very fantasy-esque tone to it. It feels like a fantasy novel. It's long. It has a huge journey. It spans decades. It's epic. It is a true epic. It's a queer retelling of the origin story of an emperor who started a dynasty around the 14th century, and I can't remember the details. The man who became the emperor of a new dynasty after the Mongols had control of China, he was a guy. And in this, he's not. It begins with a boy who is starving, his whole family is starving, but he is told by a fortune teller that he will be great. But then he dies. And then his sister goes, well, I guess I'll be great then. And so she takes her brother's identity. She goes to a monastery so that she can eat and not starve to death. And then she leaves the monastery, joins a rebel army, and rises through the ranks of this rebel army to take down the Mongols. She spends most of her time in disguise as a young monk. And the book very, very poignantly explores the concepts of being gender fluid, non-binary, genderqueer. It's about a young girl who is disguised as a young boy and eventually is both and neither. It's a wonderful, queer, pseudo-feminist retelling of a great, exciting, epic Greek myth, /legend, real historical event. It's a lot of things, and it's a lot of fun. On my previous list of best translated books of 2021, I mentioned a book that I read very, very early on in January, and I'm doing that again here. My number 4 book is Luster by Raven Leilani. This book came out right in January. It was one of the first books I read in 2021, and I have not forgotten it. Luster tells the story of a young black woman in New York City who enters a love affair with a middle-aged, married, white suburban dad. The two of them are having fun at first. Then she ends up living in his suburban house, which I think is actually in New Jersey, with his wife and their kid, who turns out to be an adopted black daughter. And our protagonist is able to bond with this daughter. But they don't just bond over the fact that they are two black people in a white suburban neighborhood. They also bond over their love of nerd culture, video games, and anime. It's a really charming and delightful book. It has a lot to say about gender roles and race dynamics and generational gaps as well. But it's also just a really fun and sweet book. It's very, very charming. It's very endearing. It's short as well. I love how short it is. I really liked Luster, and I should reread it. I gotta be careful here because I could talk about this book forever, and I don't want to. My number 3 book is Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. If you've been around this channel for any length of time, you probably know that Kazuo Ishiguro is my favorite author, bar none. Absolutely, my number 1 best boy. And Clara and the Sun is a great novel. Kazuo Ishiguro has previously said in interviews and laughed about the idea that maybe his best works and his best years are behind him. That turns out to definitely not be the case, because Clara and the Sun is one of my favorite Kazuo Ishiguro novels. I probably rank it number 3 or 4. I loved this book. The titular Clara is a kind of android, an artificial friend who begins her life in a shop window looking out onto the street and kind of praying to the sun. She has a limited worldview, she has a limited capacity, but she is designed to learn and grow as she goes, as she lives. And she is picked out by a young girl and she moves out into the countryside. I think it's set somewhere in New England, but it's never specific. And it's about Clara's relationship to this young girl that chose her, as well as the girl's mother, and the girl's neighbour and best friend, who is a British boy who moved there at some point. Primarily, Clara and the Sun is a book about love. There is very, very subtle and gentle world building here, in a science fiction-y kind of way, with the robots, with a subtle hint at genetic alteration, eugenics, bioengineering stuff, but it's very subtly injected. Primarily, this is a book about love in so many different forms. Friendships and familial love, and the love between people who guide one another and help one another. And Clara and the Sun is just beautiful and warming all the way through, as its title implies that it should be. I can't say enough good things about this. I can never say enough good things about Kazuo Ishiguro and his novels, and Clara and the Sun is exactly as good as I hoped it would be. My number 2 novel was my number 1 novel for a long, long time until my number 1 novel came around. Number 2 is Detransition Baby by Torrey Peters. This book has had as much success as I hoped it would. It's been everywhere since it came out. People will not stop talking about it, and good, keep doing that. Detransition Baby is a novel about trans women by a trans woman set in New York City, and it explores relationship dynamics, and most importantly, the relationship dynamic of nuclear families. It tells the story of a young trans woman, her ex, who has detransitioned, and that ex's current sexual partner. The ex is Ames, and Ames has knocked up his boss. And he's now turned to his ex-girlfriend and said, hey, do you want to help raise this baby? And they form a weird relationship triangle. Not a love triangle, but this is a triangle of strange and wonderful proportions. It encourages us to reassess and reevaluate how we look at family dynamics, how we look at parent-child relationships and parent-parent relationships as well. And of course, it's a book about being trans. It's a book about the state of the lives of trans people in the modern day West. And therefore, of course, it's going to deal with transphobia and the abuse that trans people encounter on a daily basis. It does explore suicide, which is very, very high in the trans non-binary community. It explores a lot of very, very difficult topics that are very, very important to me. But it's also about love and friendship and relationship dynamics, as I said. It's actually difficult for me to talk about because it hits me really, really hard. But Detransition Baby is also a very punk novel because it explores the concept of detransitioning and why some people do it. It doesn't speak for all people who detransition. Torrey Peters is a trans woman, and people who detransition all have their own reasons for it, and Ames has his reason. There's too much to go into. I could talk forever about it. I do have a video. I've mentioned it a few times. Please read Detransition Baby. I've been begging people to read it for 6 months and more. It really is amazing, and it's my number 2 book. As I said, Detransition Baby was my number 1 book until my number 1 book came along. I swear 2022 is the year that I get laser hair removal. My number 1 book is Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. Tell Me I'm Worthless is a novel about being trans by a trans woman, and it is absolutely my favourite book of 2021. Not just English language, completely. As I said, that's why I'm making 2 videos about this. I had to talk about this book again. Tell Me I'm Worthless is an indie darling novel. It is Alison Rumfitt's first book. It is published by indie publishing house Cypher Press. A few months ago I got to meet Cypher Press, and that was a lot of fun. And Alison Rumfitt, with this book alone, has highlighted the fact that she is a great rising star in the British literary scene. Tell Me I'm Worthless is an absolute masterpiece of literary fiction, genre fiction, queer fiction, everything. It tells the story of 2 women. One is a cis woman, the other is a trans woman. And at some point in their lives, when they were at university together, they went into a haunted house. And whatever happened in that haunted house led one of them, the trans woman, to be haunted by a ghost, and the other to become a TERF, a transphobe, gender critical, whatever you want to call it. And Tell Me I'm Worthless explores these 2 women's lives. They are now in their 20s, or I think maybe around 30, and they hate each other. And we see both of their lives play out whilst wondering what the hell happened in this haunted house. The haunted house itself is called Albion. The metaphor that this house represents Britain is not subtle, and it shouldn't be subtle. It should slap you in the face, and it does. The haunted house is Britain. These women entered Britain and came out tortured. One came out twisted and gnarled and angry and transphobic. The other came out vulnerable and broken and haunted. It's about the relationship between trans people and modern day Britain. TERF Island, the most transphobic and terrifying place to live in the Western world for trans and non-binary people. It's not an easy book to read, but it is the best book that I read in 2021, and this book should be read by everyone. I don't care what your gender or your sexuality is, everyone should read Tell Me I'm Worthless. And it is horror, it is scary in places, it is twisted and frightening, but it's also just a very important piece of transgender fiction, and I implore everyone to go out and read it. Give your love and support to Alison Rumfitt, Cypher Press, and the trans community of the UK. They need your help. It's probably not surprising that my top 2 books are both books by trans women about being trans. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 English language books of 2021. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Please also give me your favourite books of 2021. Tell me if you agree, tell me if you disagree. Make comments, get angry, do what you want. Merry Christmas, and subscribe for books.